The story of the Louisiana Purchase is usually framed as a spectacular real estate windfall. Standard accounts cite a price of $15 million, or roughly 4 cents an acre, to double the national domain overnight. The text of the 1803 treaty reflects a purely diplomatic agreement between empires. France held almost no actual physical real estate in the region to sell. In 1803, indigenous nations occupied nearly the entire territory. The United States only purchased preemption, the exclusive authority to obtain indigenous title by conquest or contract. Practical American sovereignty was limited to these small, striped zones of settlement. Beyond these edges, U.S. authority was a legal abstraction overlaid upon indigenous homelands. Federal officials used this preemption right to initiate a century of imbalanced negotiations, seeking to convert imperial claims into physical possession through specific treaties. The fragmented nature of this process, hundreds of separate agreements and seizures, has historically discouraged researchers from tallying the total amount the United States eventually paid indigenous nations for this soil. The payment to France secured a legal path for a century of subsequent transactions. The actual price of the territory would be paid to indigenous nations, one individual cession at a time. For 70 years, historians have relied on a single figure to quantify these costs, a total of over $300 million paid to various tribes. This estimate originated with Felix S. Cohen, a respected Interior Department lawyer who shaped much of modern federal Indian law. Cohen published this number in a 1947 Law Review article. It became a staple of legal scholarship, appearing in textbooks as the definitive measure of indigenous compensation. Yet Cohen's private records show he never actually tallied individual treaties. The $300 million figure lacked empirical foundation. During the 1940s, Cohen was advocating for the creation of the Indian Claims Commission to resolve long-standing grievances over broken treaties. He tailored his data to suit different political goals. In popular magazines, he emphasized high standards of federal compensation to convince the skeptical public that the commission would be a manageable extension of tradition. Cohen's $300 million estimate functioned as a political assurance to Congress. It suggested that the outstanding financial debts owed to indigenous nations were minimal and predictable. This figure is a calculated policy tool. It was designed to frame the financial legacy of expansion as an already settled debt. Calculating the true cost requires moving past Cohen's guess by linking geographic information systems with federal accounting records. The first requirement is a stable map of the territory. Because the 1803 borders were contested by the Spanish and British empires, the purchase area varies depending on which imperial claim is used. This study adopts the most conservative spatial parameter, the 811,000 square miles that were never contested by other European powers. Using this minimum area provides a baseline that avoids overstating costs. It ensures the final calculation reflects only the expenditures made within a strictly defined Louisiana Purchase. Inside these borders, the United States absorbed the indigenous estate through 222 distinct cessions between 1804 and 1970. Due to forced removals and overlapping claims, the total acreage ceded by tribes in this region actually exceeds the surface area of the territory. The timeline of these cessions shows a rapid transfer of land early in the 19th century. Massive multi-million acre blocks were acquired in quick succession. By 1871, the year formal treaty making ended, the federal government had already obtained title to 77% of the territory. The map of the American West is an assembly of 222 individual bureaucratic actions. Each represents a distinct moment of federal acquisition. The final step is identifying the exact federal disbursements made for each of those 222 cessions. These figures are documented in the records of the Indian Tribal Claims Section, established in 1924 to respond to a wave of tribal lawsuits for unpaid debts and unfair compensation. In these legal battles, government accountants spent years searching through historical vouchers to identify every possible gratuitous offset. An offset was any past federal expenditure, from sacks of beans to the costs of boarding schools, that the government could legally deduct from a tribe's eventual court award. To simplify complex histories, courts often converted long-term annuity payments into present values. An annual $1,000 obligation was frequently capitalized at 5%, allowing the court to value a century of payments at a flat $20,000. Because different audits and courts produce varying totals, this study follows a strict hierarchy of legal scrutiny, prioritizing final Indian Claims Commission decisions as the most accurate available data. Overlaying the 222 GIS map sessions with the court-scrutinized accounting data reveals the actual cost of acquisition. Original treaty payments dispersed between 1804 and 1970 total approximately $191 million when expressed in 1803 values. The total rises significantly when accounting for a century of court awards, trust settlements, and modern post-ICC legal agreements. The nominal historical disbursements total roughly $2.6 billion. Adjusted for inflation, this represents over $8.5 billion today. This total for indigenous title dwarfs the $294 million paid for French preemption. Even when inflation adjusted, the original treaty and agreement payments remained the largest single component of the total federal expenditure for the territory. This inflation-adjusted total of $8.5 billion coexists with a median payment of 3.4 cents per acre. The federal government's own accounting records confirm a consistent gap between the land's value and the compensation provided. The actual financial cost of the Louisiana Purchase was a multi-billion-dollar investment in the legally sanctioned acquisition of indigenous land. Mapping these disbursements shows exactly where federal capital was deployed to extinguish title. These sharp, isolated spikes represent more equitable modern settlements surrounded by vast flat zones where millions of acres were acquired at the lowest possible cost. These findings redefine the common understanding of the Louisiana Purchase. The deal wasn't a bargain because the U.S. paid France a low price for land. The acquisition was cheap because the state systematically underpaid indigenous nations through a century and a half of conquest by contract. Standard measures of the region's economic success, its agricultural output, extracted mineral wealth, and GDP contribution rest on this initial financial accounting. The cost of these cessions represents the primary capital investment in the region's development. Every extracted resource and agricultural yield followed this initial federal expenditure for title. The 1803 treaty in Paris was merely a diplomatic prologue. The actual multi-billion-dollar acquisition of the American West is permanently recorded in the colonial ledger of Indian country.